Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook. So you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one-size-fits-all approaches, just real answers, deep-rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now on to our show. Hello, Karen. I'm so excited
Hi.
Karen is on the show. We are going to have such a great conversation. Karen is a psychotherapist who specializes in CPTSD and specializes in helping women overcome, or not women and men, overcome self-talk. And she has a really strong emphasis in helping clients shift through negative thought patterns that are holding them back, specifically from childhood that they kind of bring into adulthood. So we're definitely going to be highlighting some of these things and how they can impact our body, impact our mind, impact our health. So we're going to kind of dive in, and Karen has a great story on kind of how she got into this work. So I'm going to open the floor to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So like you said, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm based in New York and I see clients in Florida, and I'm actually starting a coaching business so that I could start branching out and reach more people. Basically, I've been a therapist or in the social work field for almost 30 years now, 29 years this week, actually. And so most recently, in the past 13 years, I've had my own private practice. In the early part of my career, I did foster care work and child welfare. And then later on, I did community mental health. And through those experiences, I realized how impactful trauma, complex trauma, intergenerational trauma was on families and children and my clients. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to start researching more and more and more about trauma and learning about it. And more recently, part of what really drew me to the topic of negative self-talk and helping people redefine who they are by working through those thought processes is because of my own experience. I was married, and I found in the course of 3 months, my entire life changed. So I was literally married. I decided to start my private practice. My husband supported me at that point. Yeah, go ahead. You could do that. 3 months later, after I left my agency job, he lost his job. And prior to that, we had had a business and he had walked away from the business. This financially destroyed us. We had lawsuits. We had a lien on our house. It turns out the business was doing so bad, he hadn't paid our mortgage payments in 14 months. So we were facing foreclosure. Everything was unraveling. And so I literally started sending out resumes. I thought I had to go back to agency work. And I was coming home from a job interview that I did not want. And I was on the ferry and I was crying on the Staten Island ferry. And I'm crying and I'm like, why do I have to give up my practice that I just started? Why can't I continue doing what I'm doing and figure a way out of this whole mess? And so on that boat, I realized what was holding me back was the thought processes of, well, you're not good enough. Well, no one thinks you're smart enough. Like, your clients aren't going to like you. You're not going to have clients come in and you're not going to be able to get out of this mess. And I realized halfway through that ferry ride from Manhattan to Staten Island that, like, wait a second, where are all these things coming from? Like, I have some clients in private practice and they like me, and all my past clients for the past 15 years at that point, they like me and working with me. Like, why would I think somebody in my own practice wouldn't want to work with me? Like, where does that come from? And I realized it was messages from my childhood that were impacting me that day. And when I got off that boat, I was literally walking to the train and I called my parents up, who were finding out the financial mess that I was in as I was finding it out. And literally I called them up and I was like, I'm not giving up my practice. I was like, they offered me the job, but I'm not taking it. I don't want to do that work. And they thought I was crazy. They were like, are you sure? Like, I don't know about this. Like, I don't know. And they were the ones who instilled a lot of those messages, that doubt. And what I realized was that was their experiences, like whatever their experiences were, and they were putting that on me. That didn't mean that I had to carry that message they gave me and prescribed to me. I didn't have to carry it forward anymore. I could change who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. And I literally went home. I told my husband, like, we're getting divorced. I was like, and I'm going to go build my business and good luck to you with your life. And literally at that moment, there was a huge shift. And I got through the financial mess. I got my divorce attorney. We figured out what I was legally going to be responsible for. And I literally would take my cash co-payments at that time, and I would go to every bank on Fridays and I would pay towards every single debt that I had. Literally every single debt. And every attorney I came across was like, you need to declare bankruptcy. You need to declare bankruptcy. And I was like, I will not declare bankruptcy. Like, I will pay my last penny at the day of my funeral to make sure I don't declare bankruptcy, because I knew we were responsible for that debt. I didn't want to walk away from that responsibility, and I didn't want my kids to see me walk away from that responsibility. So I made sure every week I was making payments. I was on top of everything. And that was in 2014. And in 2018, I literally was able to buy my own house and secure that for me and my kids. And going forward, we've been debt free. I'm paying for their college. They know that. And it's just been a life-changing event for the three of us.
And it all started with just shifting the way that you view this. I mean, that's,
Yes.
you know, I think that's so powerful that you are aware of that, but so many people are not aware of that, and I think, how would you work with somebody to make them maybe more consciously aware that those subconscious blocks are holding them back?
A lot of the work I do, I ask a lot of different questions when I'm with my clients. And I do see this as trends within my clients because of the trauma. And oftentimes, the first thing that people come in with, I'm anxious and depressed. So when we unpack that a little bit more about what's lending itself, it's this thought of, I have to be perfect. Well, where does that notion come from? And one of my favorite questions that I ask people, and people get stumped when I say this, perfect for who? Because your version of perfect might not be the same version of perfect as your boss, and it may not be the same version of perfect for your kids or your husband or your best friend or anybody else. So whose version of perfect are you striving for? And when I ask people that, and they're like, they get stumped and they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, then that's what we have to unpack, because there is no such thing as perfect, and life is beautiful in the imperfections. That if you could have a perfect Thanksgiving dinner every year for 20 years, the 1 year where the turkey burnt, somebody fell down the stairs, things exploded, fire trucks showed up, smoke alarms were going, that's the one everyone's going to remember and sit back and laugh on. They're not going to remember all the perfect ones.
Oh, that literal thing happened with my family, which is hysterical. But it's true. Our brain wants to remember those things.
Yeah.
What would you say, besides, perfectionism is a big one, especially in women, but
Yes.
really in everybody, the biggest thought patterns you see come in?
Well, under the perfectionism is, I'm not good enough. So we strive for perfection so that we feel good enough.
Yep.
So then I kind of ask the same question, like, well, who are you not good enough for? And when we start, and I'm like, where was the first time you remember getting that message that you're not good enough? And then the next shift is, well, what does that feel like in your body that we're talking about that right now? What do you feel inside? What's the sensation? And what feeling is that related to? And I automatically go into the somatic work and focus them back into their body, because that's where the central nervous system is. And that's where that trauma lives, in that central nervous system. And so many people use the word triggered, but it's not a trigger. It's an activation inside of us. So I move my clients away from that word triggered, and we use the word activation more, because that's really what's happening in our bodies. Our systems are getting activated to protect us. And some of that protection is like striving for perfection and people pleasing. And I help people understand you don't need to people please anymore. It's only a matter of what, and it sounds selfish, but it's really not. It's a matter of what's going to make you most happy. And no is a boundary, and no is a complete sentence. You don't have to take everything else on. Other things don't have to interfere with your own well-being.
I love that so much. I think we need to yell it from the rooftops, but we need to feel it too. And I love that you do somatic work and you do EMDR work, because I truly believe that is really what unlocks the next level of healing for people is, outside of talk, which is important, has its place, but it's actually understanding where trauma lives and moving it through and
Yeah.
out of the body versus it just keeping it stuck, talking and ruminating about it, and it's like, I would love for you to talk a little bit kind of on that somatic side of things and what sort of benefits you've seen when people have gone through that.
It has been, and so just a little bit about, very little about trauma. In complex PTSD or trauma in general, we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And one of those three modes is activated usually when someone's talking about their trauma, or they're reliving their trauma, or they're having flashbacks. So in the somatic work, and we're talking about what's coming up in their body, some people tense up really quick, and they're like, their arms and their biceps and everything gets tight, and they can't breathe. Their breathing gets shallow because everything is just tight. And so I'll do work with people like, put your hands together and push against each other. And you can see my hands are shaking because of that. So that's that trauma moving through our bodies. That's that tension moving through our bodies. And some people, when that tension starts and the hands start to shake, they feel a need. And I let them verbalize it, go for it. And some people are grunting. Some people are just vocalizing calls or cries or whatever it is. And that's okay, because that's all that trauma going through their body. I had a friend of mine recently reach out. She's a runner. She's running half marathons and she's in training. And she was like, I can't run. I'm frozen. My anxiety's high right now and I'm in freeze mode. So I was like, what can your body do? Like, what movement can your body do? Can you turn your head from one side to another and just feel that? Does that crack anything? Does that move anything? And I walked with her through like moving breath through her body and paying attention to those bodily sensations, and then crossing her arms across her body and just literally helping her get unfrozen from that. And just those gentle movements, you start to shift and move that through your body, that trauma. And then she was able to go out for her run. She was able to do the other things that she had to do. So we got to look at what's happening with the client in the room in that moment, and then help them move through all that. And deep breathing work, meditations help with that, especially you have someone who's highly activated. We need to bring them down a little bit. And so all of that helps. And I do meditations with my clients. Body scan exercises are phenomenal. I love body scan exercises. We do eye exercises just to help orient people back to the room. So there's a lot of different things that we could do to help move that trauma along.
I love that. It's so funny mentioning the running because, in my line of work, it's so easy to be like, okay, I can't run. What physically is going on? Do we have, what physically is going on in the body? Is it mineral depletion? Is it, is there toxicity going on that's shutting down the body? And then, but, also understanding that nervous system is usually the biggest role. So I'd like for you to kind of talk on, do you see a lot of trauma or negative self-talk and intertwining it into clients' well-being, their health journeys? I know we spoke a little bit on that before we recorded, so.
I definitely do. So I have a lot of clients who come in and they tell me that they have all these doctor's appointments and they're going to one specialist to another. It's almost like a full-time job going to doctor's appointments, and the doctors can't find what's happening. And when I have clients like that, and I'll say that some clients can receive it and other clients can't, or they're not ready to hear it yet. But I'll turn around and be like, this is the trauma in your body. And we know that trauma in your body, it creates physical manifestations of itself. So let's look at that and let's work on that a little bit more. And I'm not saying not to see your doctors and follow your doctor's orders, but on the same token, we want to be aware of this. And I'll share, one time I went to my own doctor's appointment and I was sitting in the waiting room waiting to be called. And this person came out, they had just seen the doctor and they were totally dysregulated. And I'm looking out of my phone and I'm like, this is a trauma response. Like it was so powerful of a trauma response. And the lady was just very upset. She couldn't regulate herself. And the doctor came flying out and he was like, I think you have a low blood sugar episode and let's do a finger stick and let's check your number. And I want to give you some orange juice. And this client was completely like unraveling in this moment. And she just wanted to get out of there. And I'm like, she's in fight mode. She needs to regulate herself right now. Like you're not helping her. You're adding more pressure to her. You're making her feel trapped. And the more she wants to leave. So he got her back into the office. They did whatever they did. She leaves, I get called in and I'm sitting there. And as my doctor's at the computer taking notes on my blood pressure and weight and all that other stuff that he does, I'm like, that lady before me was having a trauma response and she was in flight mode and you were trying to hold her back. And the more that you try to hold her back, the more she wants to fight you. And that's why she didn't want to come back in. And he stopped and he looked up. And when I explained it all to him, he was like, you're 100% right. And I was like, I know. And so with that, the doctors don't always see those things. They don't always know what they're looking for. Just like I wouldn't necessarily know, health wise, what to prescribe for what. So it's a different scope, but that's why like we look at that as therapists, or at least trauma therapists look at that. And we know a lot of our clients have somatic physical manifestations of the trauma, and we want to help our clients deal with this. A lot of my clients, they're prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, and they're putting all this stuff in their body. And I'm like, if we could just regulate you a little bit, it might not be so bad. Like, let's not turn to chemicals when we could do like deep breathing exercises and exercise and sleep and eating healthy. Like all of those things are going to help you feel better, mental health wise and trauma wise. It's cliche, just deep breathe and just exercise, but they really do help. They really do release the feel good hormones in our brain. They release the dopamine and the serotonin. They help. People discount that.
100%. And, I think I do want to emphasize this, right? It's not a matter between not going to a doctor and having a therapist, or going to an integrative practitioner, or doing what we do, right? It's filling in the gaps that people can't fill in, right? Your doctor doesn't understand nutrition. Your therapist doesn't understand nutrition. Your nutritionist doesn't understand, how to always get through somatically, to your trauma. And that's not like, we all have different scopes of practices. So it's finding this beautiful integration of all of them. And I know both of us work with a lot of chronic health conditions, right? Mm-hmm. And one reason I got into, this more bioenergetic work is to see trauma, to see emotions holding us back, but to also see things on a physical level that are very much causing inflammation too, right? But then there's only so much, that information, can hold, right? And for us, energetically, we help move it through the body. But I almost always am like, okay, are you talking to somebody, right? Can you also, move through this? Do you see a doctor for your care team as well? If there is something like, diabetes, autoimmune, but it's also understanding that just because you have a diagnosis, right, doesn't mean you're helpless. We talked about this a little bit, right? Like, you have diabetes. Well, diabetes. Just say you have fibromyalgia. For me, I have chronic and autoimmune disease too. But people, I think, don't understand that trauma, that all of this, there is that physical element too. But for the lack of this conversation, there's that trauma element that's fueling this, and that your body can get back to health again with the right tools. And you have to believe you can heal. You have to believe that this isn't, a lifelong death sentence, right?
Yes.
And you have to be willing to maybe do things differently. And I think that's where you're so powerful too, is like shifting them and meeting them where they're at, because not everybody's receptive to the fact that trauma or energy or emotions are causing our issues. We know, we've seen the power, but it's especially very logical brained. I'm one of those people. It's like, but what about a supplement or a different medication? Or maybe they just didn't run the right lab test. And it's like, maybe that can help. And you still can't ignore this side of things. Exactly. The more you ignore it, the more it fuels, right?
Exactly. And I do work with people about what's getting in the way of taking care of yourself in that way. What's getting in the way of making those changes, and what's so hard about making those changes. And it is hard to change. And the other thing I want to say when we're talking about health and all of this plays in, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, so bear with me. But, there's this whole healthy at every size movement, which is a great movement for some people, but it does not work for other people, because I told you prior when we spoke, I lost over 125 pounds. I know for me, because of my childhood stuff, if you put a bag of Chips Ahoy blue bags in front of me, it doesn't matter if it's the smaller bag, it doesn't matter if it's the family bag, it doesn't matter if it's the party bag, I will eat the whole thing. There's no stopping me from eating that whole bag of cookies. Why? Because when I was a child and going through my childhood stuff, I didn't have coping skills. We didn't talk to our kids about making space for their feelings. The messages I got was, you're too emotional. So with that, what did I turn to? What was the first available thing that was going to make me feel better? It was food. So every day after school, I would come home and have waffles and cookies and ice cream. And then my mom would come home from work and be like, we're going to McDonald's because it's late. And so like 2 Big Macs. I was huge because there was no regulation of my food in that way. And one of the shows that I love to watch, and people are like, why do you watch the show all the time? Is on TLC, 600-Pound Life. Because as soon as the first person comes on, I'm like, that's trauma. They have trauma. I see it. I could identify it. And then I guess, I'm like, it's either sexual abuse or physical abuse. And like, I guess what kind of trauma I'm looking at. And it's a little game for myself. And I'm not making fun of these people in any way, shape, or form. But that's what happens when we're younger and we turn around and we that's one of the substances that we get addicted to is food. It releases serotonin, it releases dopamine in the brain. And when we don't get those fixes from other sources, that's what happens to us. I know for myself, and I told you, I lost over 125 pounds because I had to change my relationship with food and realize food was not there when I was feeling happy. Food shouldn't be there when I'm feeling sad or depressed or stressed. I needed to find other ways to manage those feelings and not turn to food. And a lot of people do. A lot of people turn to food in that. So there's a lot in that as well.
I love that you said that, right? And I think so often in the health industry, we're viewing it from point, X when we need to do it from A or B, right? It's not the fact that like you don't really know what the perfect recipe or how to eat. It's that there's somewhere your body is not wanting or willing, or there's some other mechanism that you need to go through. So I think it's so important to understand that emotional side. I love when clients work with the right people, right? I say that because there's I'm gonna also say this too, right? If you have worked with a therapist and you're like, well, it didn't work for me, find another one and find different qualities, because there's different people, right? Different personalities, different styles.
Yeah.
Love this, right? I specifically I love EMDR and somatic work specifically, and I feel like that is something that there needs to be more certified people in the industry, because talk therapy for a lot of people, they'll hit a wall, right? And after a while, they become almost friends, and it's like, instead of like, okay, we do really still need to move things, right? And we need to keep addressing the hard shit, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad we kind of tapped on that.
Therapy works in the relationship between the therapist and the client. So if you're not connecting with the therapist, like, I'm here, I'm loud, I'm sassy, like I have all these traits about me. That doesn't work for some people, and that's fine. I know sometimes I'm too much for people. And I've had clients come in, they meet with me once and they're like, all right, I'm out. I have other clients that have been with me for years and they're like, I love you. You're the best thing ever. Everybody needs a Karen in their life. So I'm going to resonate with different people, and that's okay. I had a supervisor one time, because we all have to be in therapy. We all have to have supervision for all these different training modalities. And you'd walk into his room and he wouldn't say anything. And I was like, why aren't you saying anything to me? Like, hi, I'm here. And he was just like, it's up to you to start. And I was like, oh, I don't like this at all. I was like, this doesn't. And I stuck it out because I had it for that particular training program. But I've had other clients come in and they're like, I don't like it when the therapist doesn't speak. I'm like, neither do I. So every therapist is different. Every one of us has different modalities that we've learned. We have different lenses that we see things with. So you got to find someone that you connect with. And that's where the work is going to get done. So it's not therapy that people don't like. It could just be that modality. It could be that therapeutic approach. It could be that person's personality. Some therapists are phenomenal when it comes to textbook. They will tell you, this is CBT therapy and this is what we're going to do. And they will go, as soon as the client veers off course of like, well, I couldn't come in, I had a headache, I'm not feeling well, my body hurts today. And the CBT therapist may or may not know what to do with that. Or if the client veers off course from that CBT therapeutic approach, the therapist may not know what to do with that. And so that's why it's important to find a therapist that you connect with and that you can work well with. That's the best thing to do.
100%. It's like that with any profession, right?
Yes.
Any coach, I think just because we'll just say a nutrition coach, you didn't doesn't mean you can't ever lose your weight, healthy, or you just didn't find the right fit. You find a thing that felt in alignment with you. And I will also say, as you grow, shift, and change, so will what you're looking for, and so will the things that align with you, right? So maybe talk therapy was an incredible first start for you, and it doesn't have to be your end all be all. You can shift, evolve, change, right? With any coach, So I know I certainly didn't get into bioenergetic work because that was my first line of attack, right? It was traditional nutrition first, then fit. Then you start realizing
Mm-hmm.
that there's things missing, and that, once I was talking about this on another product, it's like once you see things, you can't unsee them. Like when you
Right.
see the power of energy healing and with somatic work,
Mhm.
then you can't unsee it and you can't go back to the way that
Yeah.
you thought and the way your logical brain wants to like believe that, things that used to work, right?
Because then I think we get naturally curious about it. It's like, oh, this resonates with me. Let me learn more. And then the more that you learn it, the more you're like, oh, this really resonates. This is so great. And we just start to shift the more open we are to that knowledge.
And I am curious, when people do become more, start doing this work, what are the biggest shifts that you see kind of change in their, health, relationship, life?
Um, it has been interesting. It has been so interesting depending on the client and what's going on. For instance, so I help people. I have a series of questions that I ask people to help them get from that negative thought of that why they first came into therapy. Usually they come in like, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed. And then we unravel and we look at, well, when did you first start feeling this way? When was the first time you remember getting this negative message? Who gave that to you? And we start to unravel all these different things that are going on. Sometimes it's, well, I have to be perfect all the time. And so I challenge that thought process. And then from there, we usually get to the point where people are like, well, I feel like I'm not good enough if I'm not perfect. So then we move down to that I'm not good enough question, and we focus on that for a while. So literally, I use the metaphor of peeling back the layers of an onion. We're really trying to get to the heart of that trauma. And that doesn't mean we have to talk specifically about that trauma. We could talk about everything else around that heart of that trauma. We may not actually touch the actual trauma, but we want to deal with the messaging of it and the bodily work around it. So that's kind of how I start and go forward with clients. So I will share, I had a client and she was a casual runner. Every couple of days, she'd go out and run a couple of miles. And one time we were talking about this and she was like, well, I can never run a half marathon. Like, I'm not that kind of runner. She's like, I'm not a real runner like that. I just go out like 2 or 3 days a week and I run 2 and 3 miles. So I was like, well, if you can do that, why can't you train for, at this point, the United Half was coming up last year. Why can't you train for the United Half? And she was just like, that's for real runners. Well, she signed up, she got in, she did it, she ran the United Half, she had a great time. And then in November, she ran the New York City Marathon. And in September, she started school for a master's degree. So she went from all these negative self-thoughts of not being good enough, not being able to running a huge half marathon, to running the New York City Marathon, all while she just started her master's program and literally started making all these fantastic changes. And that's the work that I see with my clients, whether it's clients. I've had another client that I work with lose over 100 pounds. She's maintained her weight loss and started a coaching business. I have another client who was laid off from work and was like, obviously I'm not good enough. They laid me off. And through that, she started her own business. So people are able to move past those negative thoughts that were instilled in them by somebody else. And that was based on their experiences. And then from there, they're able to really figure out, who do I want to be? And let me move towards that.
And I think sometimes things have to fall apart
Yes.
to come back better. And that's not a bad thing. We view it as a way to reconnect with our true being and our true self,
Absolutely.
right? Instead of
Yes.
trying to fight it, like, or make a story about what it means for
Yeah.
me, right? Um,
Yes.
if somebody's dealing with somebody, unworthiness, self-doubt, feeling stuck, what would you want them to hear?
I want them to ask themselves, if my sister, brother, friend was feeling this way, what would I say to them? Because usually it's like, no, you're my best friend. I love you so much. And I love how thoughtful you are and how kind you are and how caring you are. Why can't you do that for yourself? Yes. So part of the work that I do with my clients, and I haven't come up with a name for this yet because it's not quite a gratitude journal, but I want people to make lists of all the things about themselves. And this isn't monetary, this isn't material, the traits about themselves that they like about themselves. I want them to list it, because when we're having those struggles, when we're having those hard times, I want you to go back to that list and remember all those things about yourself that you like. And I want you to look at that. Like, these are all the things that I like about myself. These are the things I may not like, but I could change them in some way, or I'm going to find a way to cope with them. And that's going to help mitigate and move from that negative thought to the positive thought. And so a lot of it is changing the thoughts and changing the bodily sensations.
I love that. And how those small moments make such a huge impact. Such a huge impact. Uh,
Absolutely.
I love this, Karen. Thank you so much for being here. If somebody wants to connect with you, where would they find you?
My best place is my website, kdtesoriero.lcsw.net. And in there is all my contact information, all my social media. I have a self-care guide in there for parents to do at home with their kids. So it's not expensive ideas. So they could check that out and download that for themselves. And everything about me is in there. So they can find it on my website.
Perfect. I will link that down below in the show notes.
Awesome.
That way that people can find it. I love that self-care. Oh, I love that. So many people need that.
Yeah, especially moms. I had a mom tell me one time, I can't afford self-care. I was like, what do you mean you can't afford self-care? Yes, you absolutely can. So the guide is about self-care as well as the messages that your kids are going to get from seeing you do that. So like reading a book teaches your kids the love of reading, gardening or like herbs and stuff on your kitchen sink. Your kids can learn that and learn how to nurture themselves with that. Exercise and movement, your kids are going to learn that and the importance of that. So it's all in the self-care guide.
Oh, how wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll definitely
Yeah.
have to search that out and see if I can link it below as well. So
Awesome. Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much. If
This was
anybody
so much
here
fun.
Yes, it was fun. Karen is so light. It's so great. If you found this helpful, if you want to go check Karen out, please do. Share it and leave a review if you found this to be really impactful. I love to hear when people have a breakthrough or really loved a certain episode. It really helps not only our readings, but also for me to create content that helps you guys even more. So wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will see you on the next show.
Bye.